G'day mates, it's Busta here. So before the video begins, I need to talk to you guys about some major things that are going on here on YouTube. But before I do this, there are always a bunch of people who complain about opening a video like this. If you're one of these people, feel free to just skip this part of the video. No one is holding you here, and you can just move on. But for those who care about the life of this channel and me continuing to make videos, please listen in. So, as some of you may be aware, YouTube is going through some issues at the moment. Again. To cut a long story short, YouTube basically pissed a bunch of people off by advertising on some shitty videos. And now, advertisers are suspending their advertising on YouTube. Which means that people such as myself are now receiving a shitload less than previously. And YouTube's response to this has been to crack down even harder on content with its community guidelines, resulting in even more casualties. And basically, the whole thing has just become a shit show here on YouTube. So basically guys, I'm sick of being dependent upon YouTube. Honestly, it's anxiety provoking thinking about whether or not I'm going to have enough money to survive the following month. I'm not a huge YouTuber by any means, and I don't make much money off of the platform. I make just enough to get by, and having a fucking guillotine dangling above my head 24 hours a day is fucking stressful. So in order to, well, survive, I've come up with a plan. As some of you may know, some time ago, I created a Patreon account when some other shit was going down on YouTube. Initially, I promoted it because I thought YouTube may be in for some hard times. But everything seemed to sort itself out, so I just stopped promoting it. Well guys, Patreon is now going to become a thing because I'm sick of being dependent upon YouTube. So the way Patreon works is that, basically, people voluntarily put down a certain amount of money for content creators to tap into. This can be from as little as $1 to as much as anyone really wishes. Creators then create the content that people love, place it on Patreon, and have the option of drawing cash from the money being put down by patrons. Well, they can choose to provide it to patrons for free as well. Now, what I'm intending to do is to create MP3s that are going to be completely advert-free for patrons. All MP3s will be obtainable for as little as $1 per week, as I'll only be drawing from supporters once a week. Which means that, although I'll be making multiple MP3s for patrons to listen to on a weekly basis, only one of these MP3s will actually be charged for. Again, all of these MP3s are going to be completely advert-free. I'll also intend to try and have them up earlier than YouTube. Also, for all of those who are wondering if they'll still be able to get the stories here on YouTube for free, for now, I'll be continuing to upload here on YouTube. But quite honestly, the amount of money I'm receiving for videos now has been more than halved. So if things keep going the way that they're going, and if I cannot gather the support I need to look after my family, then it's likely I'll need to return to a day job, which will mean a whole lot less video content for all of you guys. So if you would like to support me to continue to share the spooks with you, please consider supporting me over on Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description to anyone who wishes to jump in. Anyway, I've spoken long enough. I hope you guys enjoy the video, and without further ado, let's begin. This happened a year ago when I was working as a pizza deliverer. I often worked late at night, and despite other women being sexually harassed on the job every now and then, I never felt very nervous when delivering. Anyways, this happened at around 11 PM. I was delivering to a house, and as I arrive, I park out the front. Now there are two things that you should know from here. One, the pizza is on the passenger side, and two, this is an Australian derelict suburb. So I get out of the car and immediately notice this 20-something-year-old guy standing on the opposite side of the road, facing me. This being a derelict area, and with me being rushed, I thought nothing of it as it's not too uncommon to see derelicts hanging around the streets. But as I started walking around the car to the passenger side, I found him behind me. He asked me what the time was, and I said it was about 11ish. This still didn't have me on edge as I was used to this kind of stuff. But as I was opening the door to get the pizza, a jolt of suspension came over me as I noticed that he was still behind me, not saying anything. Looking back at it now, I find it unnerving at how subtle this feeling was, and how close I was to ignoring it, but I'm glad I didn't. I, while trying to act nonchalantly, quickly closed the passenger door, walked around to the driver's side, hopped in, locked the door, turned on the car and put it into drive. I felt like I was being overly cautious, but sure enough, he pops around to my side of the car. At this point, I feel pretty safe, and dare I say, proud in my decision making, so I cracked the window to get to the bottom of this.
Do you have the time on you?
This is the second time that he's asked this. It's 11 o'clock.
Can you please give me a lift? I need to go to my friend's and it's where you're delivering.
No.
Well, I know whose pizza that is. It's my friend's down the road. I'll show you where it is if you can give me a ride there.
The conversation went on, but you get the idea. This guy was persistent. I eventually told him to get out of here and I was calling the police. I closed the window and started dialing. As I was speaking to the police, he started yelling and banging on the window really hard. Thankfully, he eventually left and the police came and searched for him while I delivered the pizza. Stuff like that happened every now and then, but despite most of it being just immature sexual harassment, I thankfully learned to be alert whilst on the job. I don't know what he wanted, but I'm glad that I didn't find out. So this happened early in July, and it still creeps me out a bit today. I'm a soldier and live in the barracks on base, since I'm not married and can't really afford my own place. For security reasons, I won't name the base or its location, but it is typically pretty quiet around here, aside from the common parties that happen on the weekends, so this event was pretty surprising to me. Additionally, I work the night shift 4 days a week from 2 to midnight, so it is even quieter on most days when I return to my room. This night, however, was on the 4th of July weekend. Military gets a 4-day weekend on federal holidays, so the common area was a bit louder on a Thursday night, my last workday for the week, when I got back. To give you a better idea about the layout, the barracks are separated into 4 3-story buildings that share a large concrete common area. Since we obviously can't smoke in our rooms, the common areas have 2 smoking areas. We call them smoke pits. They're on either side. The pits each consist of a picnic table, a grill, and a large trash bin covered by an awning to block out the rain. The pits are the site of most of the parties that occur on the weekends, mainly the ones furthest from my building. I had gotten off of work early, so it was about 10 when I got to the barracks and made my way to my room. As per usual, on nights that don't have work days following them, there was a party at the pit furthest from my building, where most of the people outside were at. However, there was one person at my building's pit. Originally, I assumed he was just out there to smoke and wasn't up for the partying. What was strange, however, was that he had no lit cigarette, no vape, and wasn't on his phone. He just sat there, dressed in blue jeans and a red hoodie with his hood up. It was in the middle of July in the south, so this was a bit strange, but the rooms are pretty much perpetually cold during the summer. We don't control the AC, and the barracks NCOs just blast the shit on high at like 65 degrees for the entire summer for whatever reason, so I figured he might have just stepped out to warm up. He sat on the table with his arms in his front pocket and his head hanging. Wanting to smoke, I stood at the opposite side of the table and lit a cigarette. The guy didn't speak or even move for the entire time I was there. He just sat there, blankly staring into his lap. I didn't think much of it and just made my way back to my room, changed, and just patrolled YouTube for a while. It's important to note a few things here though. Each room houses 2 soldiers, and the doors automatically lock when closed. The only people with the key are the unit headquarters and the room's residents themselves. In the event that a resident loses their key, they have to call to get someone to unlock it every time they need to get into their room until the key is replaced. Additionally, my room is located on the 2nd floor of the building and is tucked away around the back a little, so unlike the rest of the building, there is next to no traffic outside of my room. Lastly, my side of the room has the only window, and is where the door is, so I can actually hear when someone really passes my room. And finally, my roommate worked an odd shift from 8 PM to 4 AM, and I wasn't too sure what days he worked. Also, the room is really dark and I cannot see if my roommate is asleep in the room when I first enter, so I close the door quietly by keeping the knob turned as it closes. This is important. So, he wasn't home at this time. At around 2 AM, I hunkered down to get some sleep. Before I dozed off, however, I could hear a shuffling outside. I peeked out the window and could see a girl tripping over herself to get to her room. I knew the girl lived in the room next to mine, so I didn't need to help her since she was literally right there. But I listened for a while until I heard her enter her room. About 10 minutes later, I heard someone walking towards my door and stop. I figured it was my roommate getting home, but I couldn't hear the obvious sound of someone unlocking the door. For a long moment, it was silent. Then, I heard the sound of my door slowly opening. Instantly, I sat up and looked at the foot of my bed where the door was. There was no sound of the doorknob turning, and no click of the lock. The door was just slowly being pushed open, as if someone was trying to enter really quietly, which wasn't like my roommate. After the door was fully open, someone, not in uniform, walked in. At first, I didn't recognize who it was until I noticed the red hoodie. I gasped and screamed,
Get the fuck out!
The man jumped and darted out of the room. I jumped out of the bed and ran to the door, but by the time I made it, the guy had jumped over the rail and onto the bushes below and was running across the common area. Immediately, I called the MPs and they arrived within minutes. A few of them did a search of the area, while the rest made trips around the rooms to check on everyone. The girl's room next to mine was also not closed. They eventually found the guy in a storage room of another one of the barracks buildings. A few weeks passed until I found out the whole story. Apparently, the guy wasn't even a soldier, but was an ex of the girl who lived next to me. Prior to that night, the ex didn't know what room she lived in, and had attempted to follow her to her room after she had finished partying. He knew she didn't have a roommate at the time, so he figured he'd be able to prey on her without anyone noticing. I don't know how the guy got onto the base, since there's always an ID check at the gate. The guy didn't even have identification on him. Fortunately for the girl, in my attempt to be quiet, I had accidentally not closed my door completely, and the guy mistook my room for hers. What's worse is that the girl had not closed her door all the way either, so had the guy not mixed up the rooms, he would have broken into hers while she was extremely drunk and likely unconscious. While it is fortunate that the girl was safe, I fear for what might have happened had I been asleep when that creep was in my room. Typically, the barracks are supposed to be safe places for troops to sleep, and things of this nature don't typically happen. But this just goes to show you that you need to be careful, no matter where you are. My apartment was robbed once, and broken into again a couple of months later. The spooky part? I had just moved in when I got very, very ill. I had to go stay with my parents while getting treatment at the hospital. No one had been to the new place or knew the address. It was full of unpacked boxes, as I was too ill to move in properly. They left the TV, they left the jar of cash on the dresser. They only took my diaries, multiple diaries. I always buy the same kind and they date back for years. They were packed in different boxes too. Someone had rifled through my stuff, found the diaries and took only those. They even left my DIY and recipe books, which are of the same style as the diaries, so they had to have checked. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, and there was no sign of break-in. There was a small handle on the outside of the pillars on the porch that went all the way to the ground. So, perhaps they climbed? The second time, I returned home one night to find the light outside of my door was off. I didn't think much of it, expecting that I need to call to get it replaced. I unlocked and opened the door and tried to turn on the light. Nothing. I thought maybe the power had gone out. But then I looked over and saw that my microwave with the correct time was on it. Something about that just spooked me. I went to wait in my car after I called the apartment complex on-call agent. He came over and I waited outside. He came out and told me to call the cops. It turns out nothing had been taken, but instead, every light bulb in my apartment had been unscrewed, just enough so that the lights would not turn on. The cops came and checked it out and found nothing suspicious, but told me to stay somewhere else for the night. The next day, after telling my sister what had happened, she and her boyfriend drove in from 3 hours away and installed deadbolts. It was totally against the complex's policy, but the management was just as creeped out as I was. The strange thing is, nothing else happened in the 2 years that I lived there.